Hey everybody, welcome back to our Cybersecurity Awareness Month video series. I'm Dawn Church, and we have the fabulous Marissa Wayman, of course, with us again.
Hello, everybody.
I loved your well, hello, creepy, spooky laugh today. It was perfect. Okay, but technology, right? All right, so how we access and control access to our technology and our data is a very critical component of IT security. Probably obviously, right? In the past, we might have controlled that access through like a local on-site server, which is certainly fine. But since our teams are now working via a more mobile-friendly and cloud-based type solutions, those same efforts might not be as secure. Our team members are now the zombies on the internet instead of the zombies on the ground of the office. So with that, we need to evolve our own security practices so that we don't leave ourselves just open to vulnerabilities from online threats. So what do? Well, we need to rise up out of the ground of the Office 2 and take our access control to the heavens, aka the cloud. So we're having some fun today, in case you can't tell. But there's two things you kind of really need to do and think about here in order to do this. So first, we kind of need to find a way to manage our zombies' access to our data in the cloud. But we also need to find a way to keep out those wicked witches of the web, and especially the virtual vampires who are pretending to be our zombies. So today we're going to kind of talk about those barriers, so to speak, that you need to set up to keep out those virtual vampires. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about the tools and technologies for how to do that and manage your zombies efficiently in the cloud. So this is kind of a two-part episode.
That's right. And the best place to start with this conversation is about beefing up the controls for accessing cloud-based accounts. Strong authentication, is the best way to make sure that the right people have access to the right things. And so we're going to highlight a few of those things that we can do simply to make sure we do.
Mm-hmm. So it only makes sense to start by reminding you that multi-factor authentication is a must nowadays. So you can kind of think of this as like your costume checkpoint. So a username and password can be a totally legit form of ID for your team members. But when compromised, it can be almost like a costume for a virtual vampire that they could use to pretend to be a known team member. With MFA, and Marissa's impression was just spot on today. All right, but with MFA, a person logging in will not only enter a username and password, but they'll then be prompted to confirm just one more time before gaining access to your data that they are who they say they are. And this prompt is real time. It's like a secondary check, like a code that's texted to your team member, their cell phone, or their email address. So it's not as easily hacked because it changes every single time and is real time. So if a person who's trying to log in can't provide that code, they can't get access. It's kind of like virtual garlic for your virtual vampires.
There's also some other additional authentication factors that you can take advantage of, like location and time of day, which basically means that you can only access systems from certain places or devices or at certain times of the day. And the idea is that the more factors that you use, the more effective it'll be at deterring that unauthorized access. Now, our next tip is to require strong passwords. This is clearly not new advice, but the specifics around what makes a password strong has been changing over the last several years.
Want to hear something spooky? The top 20 most common passwords account for 10% of all passwords in use right now. Spooky. So which means that 1 out of 10 accounts can be accessed easily if you use a password like 123456 or password or QWERTY. So start by restricting the use of all common passwords and their variations.
Yes, take away the option so they can't use it. So what should you do in addition? The best passwords are ones that are easy to remember but hard to guess. If you can picture it in your head and no one else can, it's a good password. The other thing is that for several years, we've required folks to use special characters in those passwords in order to make it harder to crack. But in doing so, we've made passwords incredibly difficult for people to remember. And therefore, it's more likely to be written down. And as you can imagine, writing down a password is not a recommended best practice unless you're using a password manager to virtually write down your password.
And of course, longer passwords are more secure, obviously. But so now we are suggesting that you make use of passphrases, which is where you group 4 or more unrelated words together to create your password. And this helps create long passwords that are easy to remember, right? But hard to guess or hard to crack. And also less likely to be written down. So an example of this might be orange Twizzlers, vampire mask, which yes, is all connected via Halloween, but hopefully you get the idea.
Of course, I got the idea. Plus I like Twizzlers. But thinking your login is secure with a strong password and a second form of ID isn't enough to keep your system safe if you have the undead lurking in your midst. And by that, I just mean having old, stale accounts. A hacker can take advantage of these accounts because nobody's really paying attention to them, right? They're old, they're stale, they're not used anymore. But that gives them this opportunity to access our systems under the radar. Not great. So what we encourage you to do is to implement a regular audit for your users across all cloud services, just to make sure that there's no account that hasn't been logged into for a long period of time. You don't want it to be lingering as unattended bait. Another thing, limiting what your team has access to will help limit what the virtual vampires can access and suck out of the organization in the event of a breach. So for example, let's say your virtual vampire gets access to your marketing manager's account, Microsoft 365 account. If that person has access to financial data like QuickBooks and your employees' sensitive information like social security numbers, well, guess what? So does the virtual vampire. So think, does this person really need access to all of these things in order to do their job? Chances are probably not. So when you do these audits, you'll want to review what your team has access to and only grant them access to what they actually need. And sometimes it changes. People change roles all the time, and their need for access changes with it. Which also leads me to make another point, which is use the right account for the right job. Accounts with admin rights or that heightened higher level of privilege gives the person using that account the power to do anything in the cloud environment. They are necessary for some tasks, but shouldn't be used for everyday use. That it just opens the potential for accidentally causing a data breach. And all of these things are examples of, like Dawn said, the barriers that you can put up to keep the virtual vampires out. And we could go on and on with these tips, but I want you to remember this important line. It can make it harder for your team as well. And that's why it's equally important to balance security and productivity with what makes sense for your organization.
Right, so stay tuned for our next episode where we will talk more about the tools and technologies available with Microsoft 365, which gives small businesses like you a simple and affordable solution to leverage the cloud's availability with enterprise level security that we've kind of come to expect from Microsoft, right? And it will also help you stay secure and productive anywhere to keep your zombie apocalypse survival guide up to date and all of your virtual vampires out and not able to get access through all of these things. So that's all that we have today for the barricades and barriers, and tomorrow we'll talk more about tools and technologies. See you then.
See ya.